Good evening. Like to call to order the April 21st, 2026 Finance Committee, starting here at 4 o'clock. And will the clerk please call the roll?
Chair Lowing,
Here.
Commissioner or Councilmember Liu,
Here.
Councilmember Byrd.
Here.
All present.
Thank you. We have three items tonight. One is to look at the everything having to do with the gas utility. Second is everything having to do with the electrical utility. Third is having everything to do with the airport. Relative to feels and getting going on the budgets. So is there any introduction before that, or should we jump right in on number one?
Chair Lowing, if I may, can I just say for the record, there are no requests to speak for general public comment?
Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair Lowing, members of the Finance Committee. So staff has actually two presentations for you today. The first is on the gas utility. I'm going to give some general background on the gas utility and some of its key attributes. Next slide, please. So this is our utility at a glance. As you all know, that this Palo Alto Utilities provides five key utility services, and natural gas is one of them. It's a very significant utility where it has a tremendous amount of assets. So we have about over 210 miles of distribution mains, and just the amount of service lines that we have, 195 miles, is very significant. Of our 270 employees, about over 50 are dedicated to the gas utility, and we have part of FTEs as we are pretty efficient about sharing resources throughout the utility. Our retail revenue is not listed here. It's around $69–70 million a year, and that is split between our operating budget and a significant capital improvement budget as well. I did want to highlight that as part of that capital budget, as you see as part of the presentation, we did get a PHMSA grant from the United States federal government, from DOT, and that allows us to do more replacements of the gas utility. And so we're very pleased with that. And we need to continue with our normal capital projects as well. Next slide, please. So I'm going to turn this over to staff, to Lisa Belier, our Assistant Director of Resources, and she'll introduce our other team members who will be giving presentations.
Thank you, Alan. Lisa Belier, Assistant Director of Resource Management and Utilities. And Eric, did you want me to cover the next couple slides? Or you
actually, I can continue that. Yeah, let me continue this as well. So, really the rate adjustments that we do are necessary for the financial stability of the gas utility. So the long-term financial stability is of paramount importance to us in terms of making sure that we're providing that valued service to the community, also in a safe, reliable, and efficient manner. When you look at those investments, it's really into our gas main replacements. We have a series of projects that are funded not through only our ratepayers, but also from the grant funds. Really looking at changing out, 52,000 linear feet of PVC and gas steel mains. Why do we do those? Those have the most predominant amount of leaks. PVC over time is brittle. It's impacted by potential earthquakes. And the gas mains and steel mains are the ones that corrode over time, so they have their end of useful life. The other key project is a few years back on Arrastadero Creek. There was some undermining of our facilities. We've actually had to move those facilities out. We're going through a CEQA process right now, and we're working through that to move some of not only our gas utility, but other Palo Alto utilities outside of that area, frankly, along the creek path, and then redoing those services to our customers. So it's a significant project. The $2.7 million is attributed just to the gas utility. We have other costs associated in providing sewer and water services to those customers. Next slide. So, how are the funds being used? As you know, we are going through a process of advanced metering for all of our meter to our customers, not only water, gas, and electric. Again, going through the services of the gas main replacement. One of the main areas of concern for us is our leak detection and mitigation. So what does that mean? By doing significant walkthrough of our system, we find those leaks earlier, we compare them at lower costs and keep the reliability of our system. We also work with excavators, contractors, making sure that we're communicating them, knowing that we have gas lines so that they're excavating safe. We provide USA markings for those businesses and residents to make sure that our system is protected. And it also reduces cost to the utility. We also have gone through most recently, just across the street here, I'm looking at some of our substandard material replacements. So looking at our gas services, what needs to be upgraded to the latest and greatest standards. So as we go through the system, we proactively make those changes as well, so we can reduce the overall costs and frankly, keep the system in tip-top shape. Next slide. So now I'm going to turn it over to staff and we'll talk about the rate design.
Thank you, Alan. I'm going to introduce Eric Wong. He's a resource planner, and he's going to talk through the rest of the gas slides.
Hi, my name is Eric Wong, resource planner for the utilities. Let me briefly walk you through our gas cost rate structure. Roughly a third of our rate is supply related. These rates are market driven, fluctuate monthly, and are passed through directly to our customers. The remaining 2/3 cover distribution costs, such as maintaining the gas infrastructure, funding capital projects, and other fixed costs, including the general fund transfer. And these rates are under consideration today. Next slide, please. This chart shows the cost and revenue projections for the gas utility. The proposed rate adjustment for the gas utility is a 9% overall increase in FY27, or a 14.5% increase in distribution rates, which translates to approximately $7.30 per month for the median residential customer. The current proposal follows the same rate trajectory as projected in the preliminary rates, with a minor adjustment from 8% to 6% rate increase in FY31. The UAC from its March 31st meeting recommended an overall 7% increase for FY27. Staff has explored several options for consideration, and we can show them later. I want to note that the grant-funded CIP project is expected to be under construction in FY26 and 27, with the projected expense of about $11 million in FY26 and $5 million in FY27. The gas utility will receive the equivalent amount as grant revenues, which is why the expenses revenue in both years are elevated. Also, as a condition of the grant, CPAU must maintain funding for the already planned project. Therefore, the gas main replacement GMR 25 that the grant-funded project has replaced originally budgeted at $9.8 million and scheduled for construction FY25 has been reallocated and split over the next two GMR projects, with construction planned in FY27 and 29. Therefore, CIP costs over the next 4 years are higher compared to prior years. Additionally, I want to mention that revenue is projected to exceed expenses in FY30 and 31. The resulting surplus will be mainly used to replenish the CIP reserve, which is currently depleted. Next slide, please. This slide shows the bill comparisons for the residential and commercial rate classes. I want to highlight that under current rates, Palo Alto median residential bills are about 11% below PG&E's, while Palo Alto commercial bills are higher by comparisons. Next slide, please. This chart outlines the key drivers of the 27 rate increase. Majority of the increase is attributable to CIP expenses, as I mentioned earlier. 2.2% related to lower sales revenue, which I'll describe in the next slide, and about 1% due to operation expenses. Next slide, please. This chart shows the gas supply low forecast comparing last year's forecast and this year's updated forecast. Usage remained low in FY24 and 25, with FY25 actual gas usage approximately 8% below forecast, reflecting a warmer than typical weather conditions and the likely impact of ongoing electrification efforts and efficiency improvements. Staff worked with a consultant to develop a revised low forecast this year, which projected usage approximately 4% lower than previous forecast over the next 5 years. This revision has resulted in lower projected sales revenue in the forecasting period. Staff conducts low forecast annually and will continue to reassess the long-term trend as new data becomes available. Overall, declining demand will put upward pressure on rates as fixed costs are recovered over fewer units sold. And the ASCAP team will work on a gas transition study to develop a long-term strategy to address this transition. Next slide, please. This chart shows the operation reserve projection. The operation reserve is projected to dip below risk assessment level due to lower sales revenue and elevated CIP costs, as mentioned earlier. But with the projected rate trajectory, the reserve is expected to recover above the minimum guideline by FY28 and reach target level by FY31. Next slide, please. This chart shows the CIP reserve. As mentioned earlier, the reserve is currently depleted. With the projected rate trajectory, the utility can begin replenishing the reserve starting in FY30. Next slide, please. Yes, okay, thanks. This chart shows the combination of all the reserve currently in the utility, excluding the cap and trade reserve. I want to mention the green bar represents the distribution rate stabilization reserve, which is currently used to store funds for the gas hedging program. The program was approved by Council in August 2024 to include a gas price mitigation adder of 5.5 cents per firm to the commodity charge. Next slide, please. The next few slides are slides that we have shown in earlier presentation. I'll skip through them really quickly. And can you skip to slide 17, please? Here's a summary of the rates proposal as mentioned earlier, some of the key drivers and comparison compared to the preliminary rates. Next slide, please. This table shows the FY27 projected build increase and percentage increase. In combination of all the utility, the monthly bill change is projected at about 8% compared to last year, or $36.30. Next slide, please. And for our recommendation, staff recommends the Finance Committee recommend that the City Council adopt a resolution approving FY27 gas utility financial forecast, including amending the gas utility reserve measuring practices and approving the transfer up to $1.5 million from the gas utility operation reserve to the distribution rate stabilization reserve at the end of FY26, and transferring up to 18% of gas utility gross revenue received during FY25 to the general fund in FY27, and amending the rate schedule as listed. And this is the end of the presentation. We welcome your feedback and happy to answer any questions.
I understand that. I just wanted to mention that UAC Commissioner Phillips is here to answer any questions. Bryce, if you could.
Yeah, I want to ask a couple of bigger questions totally related to that, but please come sit, Robert. I appreciate the slides that we skipped because we saw them before, but for the public that's listening, there are a number of items on here that were actually fixed cost reductions. For example, the credit card fees of $315,000 forecasted now. The customer like me has to pay that rate or else not put in my credit card. So I'll still get the miles for my airlines, but I got to pay 3% more or whatever it is. That's great. I'm glad that I think that one came out of the UAC commission and a lot of other ones that are mentioned here, because I know you're looking at everything you can. That said, I'd just like to get a few sentences on the issue of capital expenses, because I know how it's tied to the grant. But as we discussed at the UAC commission, again, for the public's knowledge, I'm the liaison there. We had a good discussion about it, that, the gas utility, if it was a standalone business, would be in real trouble, because it's got a declining use of its product, and there are very high fixed costs, they're increasing operating costs, and they're very high increasing capital costs in a business that at some point, we've signaled that we like to get even smaller or ultimately go away. And so what happens is the reward is we have to do higher rates to pay for the bills. So that's just full transparency on exactly where we are with this sort of business plan. So I'd just like to get a little discussion about, is there anything in the capital projects that are not tied to grants, that are not going to create more safety problems that we should be looking at? And I assume you have. So tell me what you've looked at.
Yeah, let me take a first cut at that. Oh, Alan Curatori, Director of Utilities. I forgot to say my name. So as part of the PHMSA grant that we received from Department of Transportation, is that we could not reduce the amount of investment we're making already into the system. So it had to be above and beyond what we're doing now. So that retains the commitment that we have as a city to maintain the systems in good quality, and also get the benefit of these federal dollars coming in and actually doing some rate restraint, right? Because we don't have to fund those capital projects from the ratepayers. We do take a look at our capital projects. As you may recall, the utility goes on a 2-year timeframe now in terms of when we design and go to construction. And one of the values and benefits of that is trying to create a larger project, and then we have a design year and then a construction year, so we alternate. We also take a look at any collaboration and coordination with the other underground utilities, and looking at, we're going through certain areas of the city, and also with our public works department. So looking at the pavement, right? So that we're not going into area that has already been recently paved, right? So we take a look at the capital projects going out, and we're also looking at bundling those projects. We use a pipe material called high density polyethylene pipe. It's a very similar type of for our water, for our sewer, and also for the gas utility. So when we can, we try to put those projects together. And if we can go through one neighborhood or one area at a time, we get some efficiencies there at minimally in our project management and also our construction management. So some things that we do on a constant basis to make sure that we're being efficient. And then as part of our leak detection program, so we do go through the city and try to find leaks early, find those leaks early, identify where the problem areas are, and then we put that into our asset management system and figure out what the priority projects are as well. As we've mentioned, as staff mentioned, we're working right now through a gas transition study. We've updated what we call our distribution model for the gas utility. And we're going to be taking a look at how can we do potential downsizing of the system and the capital reinvestment, and also trying to maintain those competitive rates to PG&E. We're not alone in looking at that. So one of the things we are looking at is, as PG&E and some of the other investor-owned utilities are looking at areas where I would say underserved areas in terms of that replacement. What can they do in terms of electrifying those customers? It's a multi-year plan that the state's going through right now. We're very actively engaged with that. So what does that mean? So if PG&E is looking at an area adjacent to ours, if there's an opportunity to see what they're doing and maybe partner, get some better information and help us sharpen our pencils, we can definitely do that. So we're learning from others. We're also leading. and we're bringing that forth. So we're very mindful of the rate increases. And I know Commissioner Phillips has some ideas he would like to share in terms of where the UAC was at, in terms of what that would mean. And then we have some staff, we have a follow-up slide in terms of some activities and actions that this finance committee can take a look at as well.
And then the other thing I just wanted to raise is that when you're forecasting usage of, now we're talking about gas, will be electricity sooner, later. What are you using? How much are you factoring in new development in the city as to when that's going to phase in? No more, in other words, more residents that are going to use more gas or electricity or whatever. Is that start in a certain year? I mean, we've talked about this briefly before, but what's the kind of metric you're using?
The question is mostly about the electric utility and new development.
That's where the growth is going to be, but you already forecasted the lowering and presuming that there's going to be no gas for that. So
Right. So we are trying to coordinate our electric and gas forecasts. However, our primary method for forecasting in the gas utility is a statistically adjusted end use model. So we look at the end uses of gas in different appliances and what is expected there, and then adjust that forecast based on a regression model. So that's something that we looked at. We have a couple of different options from that study, looking at base case and also an electrification case. To your question of exactly how are we taking into account the developments there, I don't fully know the answer to that. I guess I would ask Amber if you know. We do have Amber available on the line. Do you know the exact answer to that question, Amber, if we're doing an adder based on our forecast for development?
Sorry, I missed the first part of the question.
The question is on our gas forecast and whether how are we taking into account new development?
well, the question is more applicable to electricity.
Yeah.
We're not putting in new development with gas.
Right.
So
Well, not exactly.
Yeah, the gas forecast doesn't really contemplate new development except where it is already incorporated into historical trends, which I have been showing some decline in usage. So
yeah, go ahead.
So can you clarify what you mean by where it's incorporated into historical trends?
So the forecast methodology is combines econometric forecast with other variables, and part of that, like time series historical trends as far as percentage increase or decrease in number of customers, but we also consider population growth, things like that going forward. So I guess that's what I mean. There's several variables that are included. Yeah.
Well, I'm not sure what those variables are. And the reason I think that Ed was getting at this is that we've established REACH code standards, which were designed to very strongly discourage new gas hookups in all this new residential development that we have. In reality, I've heard that they're less effective than we had been planning, and that maybe a third of it, I'm not sure if this is in single family homes or multifamily, but up to a third have been having the gas hookups, whether that's for all the appliances that have gases historically been used for, or just getting the hookup because they want to have gas stoves, is something that we need to understand. But the intention had been that we would have very little new gas consumption from a significant amount of new housing. And yet, what I heard from you didn't sound like it was incorporating those policies as they've been intended.
So the declining trend in number of customers for the gas utility is incorporated in the forecast going forward. So if we're seeing that we're not putting in new services, then that is incorporated it going out into the future years.
So if I could add, and I know we're going to be talking a little bit more on the electric side, you'll see as part of that projection, you'll see actually much more significant load growth associated with electrification. We've already seen that in the automotive space. I think 1 out of 4 residents in Palo Alto have EVs. We see that growing over time. You look at the gasoline prices; it's a much more attractive way for transportation, and in terms of the affordability of that fuel being electricity. And as we are seeing potential changes in the regulatory space in terms of natural gas water heating, switching over to heat pumps, there's some opportunities there. So we really see that growth on the electric side, and we'll pause a little bit on the next presentation and talk a little bit more about what that looks like and what that means as we see future growth not only in the residential but also in the commercial space.
Bunch of questions, but I can wait until after hearing.
Thanks. Bob Phillips, Utilities Advisory Commission. Is the motion that was the resolution that was voted in by the UAC available has it been made available? It is in the staff report. Okay. So I think the major difference between it and the recommendation from staff is the 7% rather than 9% overall increase, removing the fact that we could transfer up to 18% to the general fund simply because that seems redundant. Of course, the city council can always do that independent of what, based on Measure L, independent of what we think, and the transfer of up to 1.5 million from the operations reserve to the distribution stabilization reserve. This was, there was some robust discussion around the gas rates. This was voted 4-3. The feeling is from the majority, I believe, that, which I was one, I was proposed the amendment, is trying to keep the rate increases low in the short run. There will be substantial rate increases to come, but the lower we can keep them in the short run, hopefully, I think that's better in general. I think as Councilmember Lowing mentioned, we are a little bit in a frog boiling situation. It looks like we're predicting about 1% reduction in demand per year. That means that there'll be, if nothing else changes, substantial increases per year in the distribution costs that needs to be covered, given the level of capital improvement that we need to, or we believe we need to invest in moving forward. At some point, I mean, I think I and both the staff and the rest of the commission believe we need to think very hard about, what is there a tipping point at which we need to consider relatively drastic alternatives rather than just substantial, what might become very substantial increases in the future. But that is somewhat for the future. So as mentioned, this was the resolution that was approved. There were 3 council members who voted against it. To summarize, they had fairly different reasons for voting against it. One of the commissioners believes that we should go with the 2% increase because of the city budget situation, as well as we should not be increasing gas, given that we wish to be moving away from gas. The other commissioners, I think, were concerned primarily about the fact that the demand is decreasing, and yet we continue to put a lot of money into capital improvement, and wanted to kind of take a bottoms up look at what might or might not be appropriate. Perhaps there's more massive savings if we think outside the box. I'm not sure. I don't think that staff agrees with that. I'm not sure that the other commissioners believed with that in the short run, but certainly it's something to consider for the longer run. So I don't know if Councilmember Lowing or Director Corritori, you'd like to add anything to that?
Yeah, in terms of capital refurbishment and replacement, we are audited by the federal government through the state of California. And they've come every few years and audit our system in terms of our gas utility, in terms of our replacement, our proactive maintenance. We also have in thresholds, depending on what type of leaks we have in terms of how quickly we need to prepare them. So, we're seeing benefits of actually being a little more proactive. So we don't have these large emergency repairs, and take a harder look at our reinvestment in the gas utility. So we do prioritize that. I will mention again, that state requirement. It's not just Palo Alto is looking at this. The cities of Vernon, the city of Long Beach also have natural gas utilities. So we collaborate and coordinate with them to see what at their level of investment, where they might be looking at potentially, kind of efficient retirements of the gas utility and systems that would be effective. It would be a cost savings for the existing ratepayers because you're not maybe rebuilding new lines and maybe moving people over and electrifying. So we're very excited about that. We're also very cautionary in what that looks like. We are very fortunate to have PG&E looking at areas around our service territory. Then we were tracking that in Mountain View, also in East Palo Alto. So as those opportunities arise, we'll be kind of leveraging in that and maybe leaning in on it. At this point, though, we are really focused on high reliability, high safety, and overall cost reduction. And these type of investments that we're making are prudent. And we make that as staff, and we bring forward kind of some policy levels for City Council as guideposts as we move forward.
There are no requests to speak on item 1.
I don't have anything to add to what you said in answer to your question. All right. Questions from?
Yeah. A bunch of questions here, just trying to unpack my understanding of the capital projects. So I'd like some more color and a sense of when the capital investment in gas might taper off, or whether it's sort of tapering off under our current projections. So I get a sense that in 2030 and 2031, we can start rebuilding our reserves, and then presumably after 2031, the rate increases will slow down. So what does this current, is there any intuition for how I can think about this current set of capital investments? Is it like a generational investment that will buy us 20 years of lower capital costs like grid mod is, such that would carry us over to the point where we might deprecate a gas utility? Or is it, a burst of investments, we'll have to do another burst in 2033 or something? Like, can you give some color?
Yeah, let me get a first shot at that. Would you mind bringing up slide 11? As I mentioned, we have over 200 miles of gas distribution mains at different levels of age and frankly, in terms of also useful life. But if you look at, I think it's, yes, this is our gas CIP reserve. So the question is if we're really reinvesting at a much higher level for gas utility, the answer is that, we really don't have those reserves to do so. In fact, one of the challenges that we have is kind of the reduction of the CIP reserves. And for a lot of good reasons, during the pandemic, the city really wanted to keep the rates flat. So we had to actually kind of curtail some of the recommended projects and push them out. I'm not saying that's a risk, but that is also an active decision. So as you see what we're moving forward with, these are kind of our baseline staff recommended reinvestments into the gas utility, but we're definitely not doing more, but we will do more when we get those federal grants. And that's kind of what we're trying to leverage. If you look in those outer years in 2030 and 2031, looking at the average CIP investment over time, you see those bandwidths going up. I think we'll do, as we go on next year and the following year, we'll get some more information. We're actively is investing in understanding the where we have breaks and issues with our gas utility and the age. So kind of come up with a plan of investment over time and a multi-year plan. So I think you'll see in the next few years us kind of really leaning into that. And that will guide us into our future CIP projects in 2030 and 2031 as we rebuild those reserves. So we're not, gold plating the capital projects. We're just trying to keep on pace to make sure that we have the reliability and safety for the utility.
Okay, so in 2030, 2031, we will rebuild our CIP reserves, and then what I'm hearing is that pretty soon after we'll turn around and then just sort of redo this current wave of investment, since that's our steady state.
And with that, we're also doing the gas transition study. So as part of that gas transition study, we're going to be looking at, and as the state does their 5-year pilot on looking at potentially in lieu of doing the capital reinvestment, is maybe transitioning customers over to electrify their homes or businesses. We think that might be an optimal solution as we can model our system and see where that makes sense.
Okay. So one thing that I'm going to draw from this is that in slide 6, we see the rate projections going forward 6% per year. Okay, maybe in 2030, 2031, we'll have some more reserves and we won't need to increase it as much. But in general, our expected trajectory would be in the ballpark of 6% sort of into the indefinite future, since we're going to build up our reserves, draw them down, we're going to sort of continue, or how do I read that?
There's a couple ways you can read that. As you can see in 2030 and 2031, the green bar is basically what our revenues are, and the bars are actually the expenses. So as you can see, we are replenishing reserves in 30 and 31, and you can see that reflected in the CIP reserves in those years as well. So we do a 5-year projection. It's based on what we currently have in terms of what's happening with our gas commodity charges as well, right? So, and what that looks to our customers. So, again, we try to keep those rates relatively steady to reduce rate shock. At the same time, the council also looked at a few years back, we had a huge spike in natural gas costs. That was a significant impact to our customers. So, having that reserve there as well, in case we have those issues, is of primary importance. So we don't have those high rates coming to our customers at that time. So building a cushion there as well is a part of our strategy.
Okay. But isn't the answer to George's question yes? That we're going to be getting probably 6% a year or more?
Correct.
Because that's the direction of the business.
That's the direction. That's what we're seeing in terms of it. I would like to say that costs and pricing of materials is getting lower, but it's not.
Okay. And of course, the answer I was hoping for is that after this big push in capital projects, that things will taper off, and we won't need to do more capital projects for a generation, which will mean we can coast until we electrify, but that's not the case. To a point that Bob mentioned on the UAC, are there any capital projects or long-term projects we should actually prioritize that can save us money? I'm thinking, for example, how AMI is saving the electric utility money with staffing costs, but is not affecting gas, or at least there's no sort of description of how capital projects like that actually reduce costs in the long run.
Well, so AMI is, as we have 5 utilities, it benefits all the
Right.
utilities, right? So we have, we're actually going through the budget process right now and looking at reducing some of the meter reader costs associated with that. So we staffed up, to implement AMI, but also as we staff up, we also reduce over time. So in the budget proposals, you'll see elimination of meter reader positions. We've done things like outsourcing our bill printing services. I mean, we've really turned over as many stones as we could, as Councilmember Lowing mentioned, looking at credit card processing fees. And then also, looking at other areas where we can look at organizational efficiencies. Every time that we have a vacancy, whether it's promoted or we have someone retire or move, we actually look and go through the city's hiring review committee to see how efficient we can be. So behind the scenes, there's a lot of effort going on because we do not like to do rate increases. We understand that a dollar coming into the revenue for the city is a dollar out of the pocket to our customers. That said, we want to make sure if a dollar comes out of our customers, that it's wisely invested.
Sure. But there's nothing technologically or capital perspective like sensors, cameras, better leak detection, whatever, that we think we should be thinking about over the next few years to make the utility more sustainable in the long term. Nothing.
Continuing our
particular.
efforts to actually we do actually walk the entire gas main alignment as part of our requirement for federal requirements. And that really helps us do that detection early and make those repairs before they become problematic.
Okay. Just one last question. Is it fair to say that multifamily customers are paying more than our neighbors that use PG&E compared to single family customers? Because multifamily and commercial were sort of lumped together, and I wasn't sure if there were more subtle distinctions within that.
So we have multifamily customers that are in this. We have multifamily customers that are in 2 categories, but most of them are mixed in with the residential category that you saw in that bill comparison slide. And then there's a subset of master metered multifamily customers that are billed together with the commercial customers, the small commercial customers. So that's one customer class.
Okay, so I live in a condo with an HOA that pays for the gas utility bill for all of the units. So that means it's master metered, and that would mean
Likely
that
master
I
metered.
would be paying more than PG&E. But on the other hand, if there was a townhome where each person had their own gas meter, or a smaller apartment building where each person had their own gas meter, they would be paying 10% less on average than PG&E. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Have thoughts on that, but I'll hold. And those are my questions.
Yeah.
Yeah, just before losing that, a question on how different multifamilies are charged. It strikes me that if you have a single commercial meter for an HOA, and those individual units don't have any individual metering then, right?
Presumably not in my building.
Yeah. So then those residents don't have any incentive to conserve. That's a built-in problem with that kind of system. It's not one that I can think of a way that we can help solve, but as we really have had for years on all of our utilities, efficiency programs, that's one where there's not much of an incentive system there in that. So one on the capital program, Alan, as you mentioned, with this PHMSA grant, always need a new acronym. The requirement is that we maintain funding of the already planned capital work for the next 5-year period. So when we receive the grant, as it's effective as of when?
I think it's 27, 28 is the timeline based on the construction and as a reimbursement.
And so it's not, so what was how high was this already planned capital work by comparison? So when we say that, okay, we can't reduce that 5-year plan because we received the PHMSA dollars. Was that 5-year period a big investment period, a low investment period, a typical one?
This was a typical period with our period, you know, our main replacement on schedule. Yes.
Okay, good. And then I was trying to understand the anticipated commodity costs. On page 4, under overview, it said supply purchases are expected to be about 4 million lower than last year's forecast. And out of that supply, is that a combination of the commodity cost and the distribution cost to get to our doorstep, to get to the city boundary?
I'm on page 4 looking for that and
Okay,
haven't
right
quite
under
found it yet.
overview, the
But
third line down,
okay.
says on the expense side, supply purchases are expected to be about 4 million lower compared to last year's forecast.
Okay, yeah, that's characterizing all of the different supply purchases. So we have a commodity charge, and then we have some environmental charges, and the transportation charge. We have transportation, and we have carbon offsets, and the cap and invest
Okay.
charges.
And then on page 7, under supply costs, same topic, I guess. On the third line down, it says market forecasts currently indicate that gas prices, that's the pure commodity part, will remain relatively steady over the next several years. And you note that those are highly uncertain. I hope that's the case, but I had been looking online, and it's the U.S. Information Administration is now saying that they are currently projecting nationally, which is not the same as the California market, of course, that FY26 is a slight dip, and then a current projection, a big spike in FY27. And I'm not sure how much of that is related to recent Mideast events, and whether that's a recent update from when we were the projections we were making before those global supply disruptions that basically will be meaning the U.S. is going to be exporting more LNG, which then drives up the domestic price. So I just wanted to ask about that and what we're projecting. And is that really, as we're getting ready to approve this, is it based on current projections or ones that have recently become perhaps outdated?
I will say that we're monitoring those events closely and working together with our team who monitors the supply costs. And so far, Palo Alto is not seeing those changes currently in the forecast or in the prices that we are paying. So the recent months, the commodity charges have been declining. And in working with our team, we're not expecting changes from the forecast that were included in this document.
I hope that's right, but what I'm looking at is supposedly the U.S. Energy Information Administration that is projecting a steep commodity for increase. And I hope you're right and not what I'm reading.
Yeah, this is just a really unique situation. Lena Perkins, Acting Deputy Director of Resources. So this is a unique situation where largely because California restored nearly full storage at Aliso Canyon, where you came, and we are actually physically quite disconnected from the rest of the grid in the US. And we came into an extremely cold summer. It was, so we didn't have the gas burn for electricity for air conditioning that we expected. And then we had basically 3 good hydro years. That multi-year storage is chock full. And so they're seeing this unbelievable spread between PG&E city gate prices and the Henry Hub prices for the US. And it just is really nice to be on the good side of a break.
Yeah, because if I recall correctly, a few years ago, California was on the other side.
And that was basically entirely due to Aliso Canyon.
Okay,
Yeah.
well,
So
that's
that buffering your impact is real.
good. Well, that's a nice, good to hear that explanation. That makes me feel better about it. Yeah.
And one other item is the liquefied natural gas. There's finite number of facilities that can process that. So we're largely disconnected from that
Okay.
in the larger market.
And then I did also have questions about consumption projections. And at the bottom of page 2, it says that in FY25, our usage was 8% below forecast. And I'm not sure when we get below forecast, I don't know what increase or decrease was forecast. But then we're projecting a continued drop of about 1.1% annually for the next 5 years. So what I just want to get comfortable with is that we've seen a big drop, and some of that every year has to do with seasonal temperatures, and we had an exceptionally warm winter this year. So that's good news. Warm winters, cool summers, or low gas consumption, right? And so that further would, in theory, reduce consumption. So I'm just a little concerned that we're only projecting a 1.1% increase in consumption. Decrease, excuse me. Only 1.1, yeah.
I think you explained it really well, that, you know, the changes that we're seeing from year to year and month to month primarily have to do with weather, and, you know, weather events such as the really warm winter that we had this year. We are seeing some significant reductions in gas usage this year. But as I mentioned, when we're looking more at the long-term trend, we're using regression and looking at what those trends are on the longer-term basis. And so we feel that the analysis that we did is robust and statistically valid, and that's why we are recommending the forecast that we have.
Okay, I'm just a little concerned that the regressive analysis may not fully reflect the trends and what we're inducing through our incentives on, and I know that some of that is already incorporated, but it makes me a little nervous that are we under projecting the decrease. And then lastly, I just wanted to respond to the UAC recommendation. I appreciate that the UAC is really looking for whatever ways they can to moderate what are significant rate increases. But the recommendation that we reduce the general fund transfer, which was approved by the voters in Measure L, and that the city general fund is facing its largest deficit in 6 years. This is not a recommendation. It seems that we are in a position to accept, and I just want to make sure that the UAC is not making recommendations that are kind of oblivious of those two factors. One, the voters authorized this, and second, that the general fund is not in a position of a surplus where we might be able to consider foregoing that.
We'll talk more about that in a minute. That was it?
I would maybe like to respond that I don't think the UAC is oblivious to that at all. And in fact, it says a combination of reducing and other mechanisms as well. And, I do believe the Measure L is up to 18% as stated, and that actually the council did adopt a lower transfer rate, I don't know, last year or year before last, but again,
We did that as a one-time transition to between where we had been and the 18%.
understood.
Okay, I just had a couple of other questions. On page 7 of the staff report, that discussion of cap and invest compliance costs, I need a little bit of help there with just the wording. That paragraph in the middle, we include those costs, but what are they, and how do we get, why do we know that those costs are going to go up by 12%? Just a little bit more discussion of that.
Sure. We participate in the state's cap and invest program, and there's very specific amounts of allowances that we receive and that we need to purchase in order to balance out the amount of gas that we use in the city of Palo Alto. And so we have to pay the costs of complying with purchasing those allowances. And so that's really what this charge is a charge that pays for those compliance costs. That we do calculate what that is each year, and we pass that through to customers.
And how do you come up with 12% annually for the forecast period?
So we've come up with that estimate based on broker quotes.
Okay.
So that's the estimate based on the current the regulations that are expected, as well as the quotes. So those could change, but that's what it.
Okay. Yeah, and just pointing out, this is a good statistic to have, that you've calculated that the residential bills relative to P, G, and E are 11% lower for residential. And it's just sort of the opposite for commercial. And it seems like it's substantially the opposite for commercial. So I'm not sure there's anything to do on that. But as we know, we would like our residential customers to look at the total dollars. More often they look at the percentages. And then we would also like them to listen to it's cheaper than PG&E, but they're still back on the percentages. So, I mean, I totally understand that, but we want to get all of these messages out simultaneously so they can look at, all the data points. And I know you're committed to doing that. It's just, I want to highlight that.
Okay.
And 11% lower than PG&E is significant for residential. Okay. Did you have more? Otherwise, I want to come back to that UAC recommendation. Go for that. Yeah. So I think we should just have a broader conversation on that. The dollar amount that would come out, I think it's just 1.4 million. Or does staff want to take us through that? Or I think it's just here on page 23 of the packet. Which is, as Bob said, is a combination of general fund transfer and further lowering reserves.
So the UAC asked to use a combination of lowering reserves, other levers, or reducing general fund transfer. So that was kind of where they left it and what the UAC's motion was. And so staff has thought about that, and we do have some ideas if you'd like us to walk through those.
Yep.
Okay. Let me just share my screen. Sorry, I'm still trying to share the right thing. Okay, so at the top of the slide, you can see the UAC motion, or characterizing the UAC motion. And so staff is responding that the decreasing the rate increase from 9% to 7%, that could be accomplished by reducing the general fund transfer from 10.7 million, which is what is included in the staff forecast for fiscal year 27, to 9.3 million, or a reduction of 1.4 million. And we thought about some other levers. Yes, the UAC had suggested the use of reserves, but there really aren't reserves that are available, so that's not in the list. One option that we think may be available for consideration is to slow the recovery of the gas price spike mitigation reserve. Those, according to the council direction, are being recovered over the next 16 months. And this recommendation would go to council to say, let's continue to recover those funds over a 32-month period. So we would slow the recovery of those funds, and that would result in a gas bill reduction of about 1%. So that's something for consideration. I just want to add that gas prices, as we mentioned, are low right now. Commodity prices are low. And so staff feels that, we wanted you to be aware that it's potentially a good time to recover those gas price spike mitigation costs while the commodity costs are low. However, this is something that could be considered and still move in the direction of recovering our gas price spike mitigation reserves. Another thing that could be done is...
Can I just interrupt
Yeah.
really quick? So we really challenge staff to come up with any ideas out there. And I'm not saying that we're recommending these levers from city council, but as you can see, as we go to the second and third bullet point, we really are not looking at, there's not a lot of levers left that we can really pull. But that said, we still wanted to provide those potential levers just for discussion purposes.
That's great. Appreciate that.
I just wanted to put that in context. We are not making this as a recommendation. We're just showing that other levers out there. So
That's great, as we
for
have
context.
4 other council members eventually to present to as well.
Correct.
Another option is to utilize some cap and invest funds to provide one of the authorized uses of those funds is to provide a climate credit for customers. And this is something that the council did consider last year and was not supportive of it. It would be using those funds for a climate credit instead of sustainability and climate action. So there's a trade-off there. And then the third option that we've thought of is, the city has made a policy choice to have a carbon neutral gas utility. We could pause or stop paying for carbon offsets and not have a carbon neutral gas utility, and that could accomplish approximately a 1% gas bill reduction. These are all bill reductions, not rate reductions, because our revenue requirement and our rate increases would remain the same. But because these would change those pass-through supply charges, it would result in a bill reduction for customers. We did look at the use of the base electrification load forecast from the discussion here. It does not sound like there would be interest in that, but just so you're aware, that last bullet on the slide, if we did use a higher load forecast, it would not impact the rate increase that we need. So those are the things that we examined and the things that we wanted to bring to your attention for your consideration.
Yeah, no, again, really appreciate the options, and I can see you stretched to get some things for the slide. That's really nice. Just clarify the 1.4 million, is that equal to 1%?
No, that's equal to 2%. So that's trying to achieve the
Okay. That's why I
UAC's.
asked. So if we wanted to get to 2% and not dip that, we could take 700K from there and the 1% from the 32-month instead of 16 months. This is
That's an option.
one way the math works.
Yes.
I think something related to this for the utilities department, maybe not this finance committee, but I think we're I think we're all getting more of the emails from consumers is the folks that have been around a while and around a fixed income. And so when they get these big increases year after year, then it starts to really, all prices are up. So we'd love to see some action that could be taken. I know you have some discounts for needy people, but maybe there's it'd be really simple if you just said over age X, you do something, but that may not be the way you do it, and encourage people who can afford it to pay it anyway. But don't want to get into those details. But if there's just some way to help the folks that are on fixed income, which is generally the older folks, that'd be helpful. Comments on these options, George?
I am comfortable moving forward with 9%. I think the general fund point is well taken. I think none of these options are particularly appealing, or the slower recovery of the gas spike mitigation reserve is maybe the most viable option there I see, but it's still ostensibly, it feels like a Band-Aid. So I'm comfortable with the 9%, also buffers us against other potential supply cost changes, which are not here yet, but a factor in my thought process. Sort of piling onto Councilmember Lowing's point, I would also love to see a rate design in the future that separates multifamily residential from commercial, so that the discount compared to PG&E for residential is proportional to all residents. I realize you can't just make the rates that way, but something to think about as we plan the next set of rates.
Pat?
So I too am focusing as the only one of these other levers that I would consider is whether the spike mitigation would be spread over 32 months. The thing that makes me uneasy about that is what we were talking about earlier, which is what's happening in global energy markets, and are we in a period of potentially higher volatility, and nobody really knows what's going to happen, but there's a lot of projections that it's going to be with us for a while and in somewhat unpredictable ways. So I'm a little hesitant to take advantage of that. It's a tough pill to swallow, this 9%. And I think one of the things that we need to really demonstrate and include in the presentations is what you alluded to earlier about that basically during the first couple years of COVID, rates were basically frozen, and we depleted our reserves as a result. And we can't go back and correct those actions. We can try to learn from them, because we really didn't see incomes decline in that period because of all the subsidies, and yet everybody thought we had to make up for it in different ways. But we need to make sure that our ratepayers understand that we're having to have these increases now, in part because what would have been, if we can go back and project what would have been on a cost basis, what would have been the increases in those years versus what they actually were, and really highlight that and say, we're playing catch up now to this degree. This much of the increase is attributable to those actions. You as ratepayers got the benefit of those actions, but now we're having to make up for it.
Process-wise, when do we have to have the rates relative to the budget? Meaning, could we come on this item with two options or this option to take to the full council? Or do you need the rates before that happens?
Director Kurtori, can you remind me the noticing period for these? Same day as the public hearing.
Yeah.
Okay, but then staff
15
needs,
days.
you'll need time to rerun the numbers to implement it.
I think it depends on what the finance committee has as a recommendation. If there is a lever to slow, let's say, as the gas price spike mitigation reserves, that's
Mhm.
different. We're still looking at a reduction. They'll see a lower amount.
I thought reserves were off the table.
I'm just saying if there is a different recommendation that you were going to make.
That
That I'm not hearing a different recommendation.
Well, what I'm trying to tee up is if we have this conversation with the 7-member council saying, here are the options, and this is what we discussed. And if you want it to be 9, it's this. If you want it to be 7, it's one of these 2 things, and have a discussion. I mean, we talk every year about the gas reserve that can be used or not. And we debate about it, and it takes money away from the general fund.
Yeah, but this committee really is obliged to make recommendations to the council, and then the council can have a
I'm
substantive
not
discussion.
disputing that.
Yeah.
I'm just asking if there's time after
What's
that,
the
given in terms
process?
of the rate.
Sure. So let me at least tell you the normal process and your timing from that perspective, and then perhaps any, I'll ask Director Lai to help me with any flex. So typically the committee would make a recommendation at today's meeting. That information, the 2 teams would flow through both budgets, frankly, to make sure that the revenues, because it's not just the rate revenues, we are a customer. So it impacts our UUT, it impacts our allocated charges. We're not talking a lot of money. We're talking about less than $500,000 probably, but it's still a piece of work to balance and reconcile amongst everything. Typically, these recommendations from today wouldn't go to council until June. I would say at June, it's too late to change the time,
Yep.
the recommendation. So that's where I might ask Director Lai, is there a process or a checkpoint during the May period that they could revisit this, but would still give you enough time to reflect a recommendation?
So in the May deliberations where we have those 2 days, usually day 2 includes rates. When we talk about rates, we're really talking about fees. These are the fees that are on the fee schedules, right? Recreation fees, those types of fees. Usually we don't bring utility rates back on May 5th or 6th. If we wanted another touch point, you can. We'd have to build out that day a little bit more and allocate more time. You will see at that point then the fiscal position of the general fund and the extensiveness of the reductions, and that may help you solidify your position on this. I think anything later than that junction would be extremely difficult for us to react to.
Okay,
But you're saying that we could do this in one of the times in May.
well, that means if you want to be with the full body of 7, you'll be with your full body of 7 on May 4th when you receive the budget, the proposed budget, with all 7 council members in a study session. Typically, the 3 finance committee members at that time are in listening mode to the 4 members that are receiving and providing feedback to you all to help your deliberations. So I would say that's the next chance you could, as part of a study session, get a pulse of your colleagues to inform the next 2 days of deliberations. But that's probably as late as it can go.
We've got tons of things to still consider in budgets.
You do.
And we don't know what you guys have cooked up in terms of
Yes.
the deficit. This is just, I think this is one of the hottest items for our consumers in town. And so I just want to be sensitive to what they're telling us.
Sure.
Now, the challenge is then if we're going to handle it this way, then the item would have to be continued, right? Or there's not going to be a recommendation coming out of today,
I see.
right?
Yes, you would need to
So-
continue this item to make a recommendation at a future meeting.
I will share with you in that, the financial position of the city's general fund is such that we are moving through with those deficits we presented in the long range. And in addition, council did hear through the nonprofit work plan, we've had to roll those back. So any discretionary allocations to the nonprofit work plan would have to then come back to Finance Committee for additional appropriations not contemplated in the budget. So the general fund is already in that financial situation. I think going further in this direction would cause us to go deeper into reserves or other service impacts. So just wanted to share with that.
Okay, so a couple of options. One is we can just continue this, have this discussion in the context of other things that we have to look at, cutting or adding. Secondly, we could come out with a recommendation now and just go with it and still have this conversation in June, but we're just doing it without all the stuff on the table. Yeah, obviously, as we said, well, as you two have said, I'll join the party. The least difficult is getting that 1% out of smoothing the curve of the payback. So, I mean, I think that's even worth doing to get these things down from 9. I mean, consumers look at 9 and it's almost 10. That's why they price things at $4.99 because it's under 5. So. So, I mean, that's a middle ground where we could say, okay, we think it should come down to 9. We'll take it off this thing. It doesn't hurt the transfer from the gas tax, and then give our reasoning to that or all sides of the story at the time that we present the budget. Then we could finish up on this item today. So
I mean,
I'll put that on the table
Here.
as a motion to get consideration. Colleagues. No second.
Can you repeat exactly what would be considered in
Exactly
June?
what was on the screen?
Okay.
That we would take the 1% from the smoothing to go to 32 months from 16, and that would get us 1%, and it would sort of split the difference between 9 and 7. It would be 8, and we'd be done. Done until we take it to council, I mean.
I'm fine with the 9%.
Okay, dies.
So I would like to have just a little more discussion on the ramifications that might occur from that. So when we went through the big commodity price spike, and that was very painful, and it meant that members of the community had huge increases as a result of us not having enough in reserve and not responding quickly enough to those commodity increases. So we run that risk if we don't replenish this. And if we saw commodities going up rapidly, my recollection is that last time when we had the big spike, part of the problem was we didn't respond quickly enough, that it got into a big deficit before we, and we didn't have the reserve there, and I'm trying to remember all the details.
Sure. I'm not. I think it is fair to say that the pace at which it was occurring absolutely was rapid. And I think staff did take the typical approach, if I remember correctly, to move through adjusting the rates to accommodate a higher pass-through number. Council basically, if folks recall, there's a pass-through ceiling of commodity costs that can be passed on to the customer. During this spike, they exceeded that ceiling, and they exceeded the revised ceiling. So basically, I don't remember the exact numbers, but let's just say there was a ceiling of $2. The prices were spiking up. Staff got council authority within a month or two to up it to $4, and they exceeded the $4 threshold. So to the council member's point, I think there's some process in there and a lag in terms of to get that authority. Ultimately, staff never charged that $5 pass-through charge. And so what happened is we charged up to the ceiling, the revised ceiling, say $4, and that difference actually drew on reserves. So that's another draw of over $1 million. Staff can correct me of what the actual number is, but that was another draw on our reserves that instantly depleted, and we had to obviously go through rates to replenish.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get at if we saw another commodity spike, would we be able to respond any more quickly? And what would be the ramification of not having replenished our reserves when this hits? And that's what I have trepidation over.
Fair. And I believe we are not a long-term purchaser as much as we used to be. And that's another reason why we're very susceptible to those spikes, is that we don't have a lot of buffers to what is occurring other than things like this reserve. Lisa, do you have additional color for the council?
I think that is exactly the way to think about it. And that's why the council put in place this reserve for this very specific purpose is, I think the target is 4.5 million, 4 million, excuse me. The target is 4 million in this reserve at the end of the recovery period, which I think was going to be in 2028. So this would push it into 2029. And so we have recovered some of the funds already. So I think, it's a risk assessment that the council would have to grapple with as to whether to stick with that original timeline or whether it would be acceptable to go to a longer timeline. That's not something that we have a lot of analysis on right now, unfortunately. It's more of a risk tolerance question.
I think you're exactly right. Nobody can really predict this, and but I will say that the pain for residents on that was real severe. This is significant, but nowhere near what they had to do there. And I'd rather have us swallow one pill now than 10 pills later. Yeah. So
People have short memories. They deal with the present.
well, but that can be deja vu. That can happen again. Is the point? Is what I'm making. And I want to avoid that.
Is there an alternative recommendation on this?
So I think it's the staff recommendation as written. Is that correct? So that would include the 9% increase. So that would be my recommendation.
Any other discussion or go to a vote?
Did you get a second?
I'll second that.
Yeah, he said he was behind that. Okay. No discussion. We take a vote.
May I ask for clarification? Is the motion on the table right now just the staff recommendation, or does it include the slow recovery of the remaining gas spike? No,
just the staff recommendation. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Christine, will you be showing this the slide with the full recommendation? Just want to make sure we're capturing all the different parts of it.
Okay. Staff agrees that's correct. That's what we're voting on. Yes. Okay.
Councilmember Liu,
Yes.
Councilmember Lowing,
No.
Councilmember Burt.
Yes.
Motion carries 2-1. Lowing, no.
Okay. Yep. Are we done with this section, right? Yeah. That's what I mean. Yeah. Okay.
Can we bring up that presentation, please? See if it's All right, so I'm just going to introduce the first slide. Also joined by Terry Crowley. He's the electric utility chief, actually the utilities chief operating officer, formerly our assistant director of electrical engineering and operations. He's going to give some of the background of the electric utility, some of the needs for the rate adjustments. So I'll turn it over to Terry, and then Lisa Boulier will go through the presentation on the finances. Thanks.
So good evening, council members. Next slide, please. So just to give some perspective of the scope and scale of the utility and what it takes to provide the community electricity, some numbers running through this. So 900 million kilowatt hours annually sold, all that's delivered through the city's wires throughout the city. So roughly 30,000 meters. 317 miles of high voltage line. So if we could line that up end to end, we could get to Santa Barbara. 17 miles of subtransmission. So not quite, that's a loop that goes around the city, but not quite enough for a marathon, but it's pretty close to that. And then that subtransmission and the miles of high voltage distribution are connected by the 9 substations within the city that we manage. So operating budgets, 230 million for operations, 85 million for capital, total 350 million total budget. And again, carbon neutral utility. Next slide, please. So why do we do rate increases? So one of the things that's important is to continue to look at the fair cost recovery. So as we provide service, there's a cost of doing that, and we want to recover those costs fairly across the different customer types. We want to maintain long-term financial stability for the utility. And then we also want to adjust to changes in our commodity prices. So changes in carbon-free energy, changes to new energy markets that might be necessary for growth within the city or exchanging for old contracts that are expiring. So there's some changes there. We're seeing some increases in energy costs. We're seeing some losses of revenue for other things that recently we've been able to sell off in the market. And then again, one of the reasons that we look at these is to find ways to support council goals for electrification and wildfire mitigation. So some fairly significant projects to mitigate the risk of wildfire for the community. So the Foothills Undergrounding project is a significant cost, but a significant benefit and safety for the community. And then again, we're entering a period of increased capital due to grid modernization. So preparing the grid for electrification, again, a climate goal, very strong climate goal for the council. Next slide, please. So what are the values of the service that we provide? So continue to improve operations, through preventive maintenance, increases service reliability. So the reliability grid, as we become more dependent on it, is important. The grid modernization will replace aging facilities, which will also improve reliability, but also increase electrification. And then we have advanced metering. That's a cost saving measure, initial cost there, but long-term cost savings. Wildfire mitigation, discussing that as far as that's necessary for public safety. Reviewing the supply, evaluation of market, and continued advocacy for additional transmission source. So finding more reliability with the city's transmission sources so we can prevent wide scale or citywide outages. And then again, locally driven programs. So that's another value add for the community, is locally driven programs for electrification and greenhouse gas emissions. Next slide, please. So with that background, I'd like to turn it over to Director Boulier so she can walk through the finances.
Thank you, Terry. So starting with this slide, this is just to give you a sense of the total utility cost structure. About half of the rate is related to supply, and you can see that on the pie chart on the right with the blue, various shades of blue, showing those total supply costs of 79 million. We're transporting and purchasing the electricity, and then the remaining part of the rate is shown on the left side with the light green for operations and the orange for capital. So you can say about half of the costs for the utility is relating to, the distribution system, operating and maintaining that system. Next slide, please. This is a chart that shows our costs and revenues. The costs are in the stacked bars, and then the revenue is in the line along the top. And the year in question is 2027, fiscal year 27. That's where we're raising the rates for and projecting our costs for. And you can see that also what's happening in 2027 is that hashed bar. We are currently in the past year, 25, also in the current year, 26, and in 27, beginning to spend towards our grid modernization project. And we are expecting to issue the bonds in first tranche of bonds in fiscal year 2027. And so that is capturing that weird hashed bar there is capturing that reimbursement for those costs. Next slide, please. The electric bill comparisons, I'd like to report that our electric bills are about are much lower than PG&E. You can see the difference from PG&E column there between 40 and 47% lower than PG&E. And you can see on the top showing the smaller customers. And then on the bottom, you can see the larger usage customers, commercial customers, also lower than PG&E. Next slide, please. This chart shows our operations reserve projection as well as our guideline ranges. And you can see that with this forecast, we are targeting the reserve target of 90 days of operations and maintenance and commodity expense. And we're able to stay relatively close to that target throughout the forecast period. Next slide, please. Oh, I forgot to mention, we do also have a hydro rate stabilization reserve that currently has about $18 million in it, which is close to the target level for that reserve. However, given the increased possibility of having higher poor hydro years with climate change, this plan does contemplate moving $6 million next year if the funds are available into that hydro rate stabilization reserve. These two charts show our CIP spending and show the grid modernization costs relative to the other capital investments. And the bottom chart in blue shows the breakdown in some of the key grid modernization projects, and also an estimate of the portion of those projects that are needed in order to address aging infrastructure, and the portion that's needed for system reliability and for capacity building. Next slide, please. So you can see that for all the different categories and usage levels of customers, you can see that the change, what the change is in terms of the rates and the 6% overall bill change expected. Next slide, please. As in the gas utility, we do have some really important information in these slides on our communications and outreach, on some of the savings and cost containment measures that we have implemented. I am going to race through them quickly, but would encourage you to take a look, and they're available for council members as well as members of the public who have questions in these areas. If you could skip forward until the next few slides, if you can move forward through that one. This one, let's talk a little bit briefly about, we touched on this in the gas. If you don't mind going back one slide, I just wanted to touch on the fact that, the department has been looking at efficiencies and reductions across various cost categories to try to look for as much cost containment and efficiencies as we can. So what this slide does is estimate the impact of those reductions on the electric utility specifically. So you can see some of those dollars being reduced. Next slide, please. This slide summarizes the proposal, which is for a 6% overall rate increase, and that is equivalent to $5.10 per month for the median residential customer. I touched on some of the drivers. We have investment in grid modernization. We're going to be doing our bond issuance in 2027. We do have power supply costs that are lower than budget in the current year, but we are expecting high market prices for resource adequacy capacity. And we are expecting some of our longer term costs to increase, including transmission costs and resource adequacy requirements and costs. This budget proposal, this rate increase is the same for fiscal year 27 as what we brought to you in the preliminary forecast when we came to you back in December, I believe it was. And it has come down a little bit in 28, 29, 30, and 31. So just wanted to highlight that and also mention that from the UAC perspective, the UAC voted in favor of this recommendation. Next slide. I think this is this actually summarizes for all of the utilities what the overall proposal is. And it is for an 8% overall bill change. And so you can see how that breaks down by utility here as a reference. Next slide, please. And this is the summary of our recommendation. I did want to mention the $5 million there. Currently, the CIP reserve is below the guideline range, and this would we're trying to restore that reserve to the minimum guideline level in 2026 with that transfer that's described here. With that, we have a team here. We'd be happy to try to answer any questions that you have.
This was a much less controversial recommendation. Then was voted with one commissioner voting no. The basis, that was Commissioner Metz. His basis was there is shown in the staff report, not in the slides, but tremendous uncertainty up to 100% in load in the future, and a concern that we had not had a strategy for really incorporating that level of uncertainty into our current rates. I guess speaking for myself, but try to be. It says it's on. Sorry. Well, actually, not my fault, so I'm not sorry. I think the committee was very satisfied with the analysis. We've gone through pretty carefully a lot of the investments, particularly in terms of the grid mod, and very much applaud staff's efforts to find ways to, in some cases, delay and stretch out projects in order to keep the rates low. We are fortunate to have PG&E supplying electricity to our nearby neighbors, so that makes us look good by comparison. And I think that pretty well summarizes, at a very high level, the commission's viewpoint.
Is there any public comment on this item?
We do not have any requests to speak for number 2.
Okay, thank you. Council members, questions? George?
Yes, a few questions. Similar to a question I asked on the gas utility, what does the longer term trajectory beyond 2031 look like for electric cost and revenue projections? Just so I have that context in a sense of what reserves and investments look like long term. I understand that some of the dates for grid mod continue to 2033 and well past that, but do we, like with the gas utility, foresee 6 or 7% increases in the indefinite future, sort of beyond this forecast period?
I would just offer that, this is a 5-year forecast, and the further out that we get beyond the 5 years, it becomes very uncertain with a lot of different things that could change, not just, the commodity, but then, policies and regulations. And so that's why we don't really have a robust forecast beyond that time period.
Yeah, if I could add, and I just wanted to mention and thank Commissioner Phillips to being here. One of the items that we look at is the potential growth on the electric usage. So as we see more commercial activity in Palo Alto, as more businesses move in, and knowing that we have such competitive rates, and new capacity, we actually see those larger customers coming in actually helping our overall rate trajectory. So we've done some significant analysis on that. We are not talking about large, big box data centers. We're talking about businesses coming here and they need to have their own compute, on site with them and in this high tech atmosphere. So we're really pleased with some of the trajectory that we're seeing, and that's what you'll see in some of these larger projections over time. As you also may recall, we also look at 10, 20 years out in terms of our transmission planning process, in terms of those projected loads coming in. And there's factors that we work with the California Energy Commission in making those, and CAISO on what that looks like in the future as well. So while it may seem high in terms of those projections, the state is really looking to electrify everything, move toward electrification, and our projections reflect that. On a cost level, in terms of sales, we are showing increased sales over time. But because of that unknown in terms of the economy, looking at what may happen, not only the administration, what that has done to some of our resources mix and making those a little more unaffordable, we feel very comfortable with our projection right now, but we will have to revisit this. It's going to change.
The current load projection, I understand, will revisit at the end 2026, and it is basically flat. Whereas in this last year, load was 14% higher than forecast, and I know there's some reasons, and we've already seen that slow down going through this year. But can I get a sense of the sensitivity of rates to that load forecast? Like if loads are not flat, but actually grow 5% over the next couple of years, would that mean that the 6% increase only needs to be a 5%, it needs to be a 4% increase? Or does it mean that the 6% increase is actually a 5.99% increase and it doesn't actually affect the rates and doesn't matter? Any intuition there?
Yes, that's actually one of the prime questions that the UAC asked us.
Yep.
If we have some of these larger commercial customers coming in, what does that do to the rates? We looked at that in our commodity costs and our resources and our investment. So in a nutshell, if we had another 8 to 10 megawatt medium-sized customer coming in, that actually reduces some of the rate requirements and maybe 3 to 4%. And why is that? The reason for it is because we already have some booked investments into our infrastructure, so we have a much higher utilization rate, and those customers are really very efficient in terms of their use of power. So they're not very spiky. They have a good power curve. And it's much easier for a utility to efficiently provide them that service. So we see those customers coming in actually reducing the pressure for rate increases.
Right. But I'm not talking about a few large commercial customers, but I'm thinking if there are 1,000 extra electric cars and a few thousand and hundreds of home electrifications and couple thousand all electric homes, and that increase, I don't know how that increase would compare to the increase you just described with a few commercial customers. And if it's in the similar ballpark, I'm highly confident that some version of that would happen. And so and if that were the case, would that mean that we wouldn't need to increase it by 6% if we thought that loads would increase by a few percent over the next few years, just from those sort of lower levels of electrification?
Where are we trying to get to with this question?
We're making a really big assumption, and that's justifying, I mean, 6 to 7%, still well above inflation increases into the indefinite future. And I don't know how far we can really push this in this meeting, but I would love to see, 5% instead of 6% or something to that effect.
In response to Councilmember Liu's question, this is Lena Perkins, Acting Deputy Director, Resources. And, I will say that we revisit this load forecast multiple times a year for our hedging, as well as, we try to benchmark it for the budget annually. And so we're not locked into future year rate increases,
Right.
but we can't count on load that isn't there because, as you mentioned, we are sensitive to the load that shows up. And so if we overestimate load, then we're setting ourselves up for a double-digit rate increase if it doesn't show up. So I am cautiously optimistic, mostly from the small existing office space data center customers, that we could see lower increases in outer years.
Okay.
And the scale of the electrification you're talking about, would have a similar impact again especially if they flatten their load. When we all charge our Teslas at the same time, that is tough.
One other.
Maybe I could just answer, part of your question was for those, if you had more electrification, you had more vehicles, you had more, what does that look like in terms of demand? So when I was mentioning like a 10 megawatt increase for, commercial, that would be like an 8 to 10% increase in load.
Okay.
When you're talking about residential, they're about roughly 20% of all the energy demand in the city. So more Teslas, more electrification, maybe 1 or 2% increase.
Okay.
So just on kind of that factor in terms of kind of that summary, it won't really affect and change it that much.
Got it.
Just in summary.
Got it. Good to understand how spiky that is. Thank you. One last question. Operational costs in the last year were around 8.4 million less than expected, and there are a bunch more operational efficiencies proposed. How sustainable are those about 8.4 lower operational costs than expected? And are those operational savings just rolled into this coming year and sort of baked into that rate assumption?
He's not looking, but I'm going to ask for Dave Wan to come up and maybe talk a little bit about the operational side.
Okay. Oh, the current year. So Dave.
There we go.
Dave Yan, Utility Strategic Business Manager. So yes, so some of these are going to be sustainable. Like for instance, is the meter readers and the outsourcing the bills. These are permanent changes with the advanced metering infrastructure now. We don't need physical meter readers to go read the meters every month. These gets transmitted wirelessly to us every month. So that does save us money. So eliminates the headcounts, the vehicles, the maintenance of those cars.
I guess I see what maybe 1.7-ish in ongoing operational savings. But last year we were 8.4 million under budget on lower operational costs, according to table 2. So that seemed like a potentially recurring set of savings that we should try to capture more of if operational costs were actually pretty significantly below forecast. I would think we could maybe capture more of that on an ongoing basis, or that this could add on to those savings in the future. But I suppose we might need some time to pull that up.
Yeah, we think the majority of those savings might be just commodity cost related, so it's more annual, seasonal versus ongoing.
It's more lower market prices.
But there's a separate line for lower electric supply costs, and that's different in table 2 on page 5 of this.
Our
stuff.
transmission costs are also aligned with our power supply costs. And so I think we had lower transmission costs as well. That would be in a separate line.
Okay. Folks see the 8.353 million in operational cost reduction, but I guess we don't have the full story quite right now.
Then give me a moment.
Yeah.
I'll get back to you on that.
Okay, thanks.
Pat?
Thanks. So first, I just want to follow up on the issue of the our consumption, supply consumption, and as the staff report pointed out, for 2 decades we had seen a decline in consumption because of our efficiency programs, and efficiency still occurring as we electrify and have that move us in an opposite direction, but the efficiency gains are still there. And one of the things that staff has pointed out, and we've discussed over last year, is that the AMI meters are a tool that empowers individual users to improve their efficiency. They're looking at their consumption in a more granular way, and they really now have that feedback. And I don't know if we have any estimates about how much that will move the dial on efficiency in coming years, or is it just something we kind of have to watch and assume it's going to be there, but we don't know how much? Is that?
I think it's okay. On the customer side, I think we are going to be
It's working. When it's lights on, it's working.
We are launching time of use rates, so I think we'll have a better sense of how much savings it's going to produce in the coming years. I think we have a small pilot right now, but we're hoping to do a full launch maybe in the July, August timeframe. So then when the customer starts modifying their behavior and get those savings is when we'll see that reduction. But on the operational side, we are going to be getting better transformer data, so we can upsize or downsize transformer appropriately based on the demand on the homes and the meters. And also we can do, I think, voltage loss, measuring the voltage. So we're losing less power when we're delivering the power as well. So there are some efficiencies.
So I'm sorry, I want to make sure I understood that. Was that on the transformer side, that's as a result of the AMI?
Right. For the
Okay.
meters, we can now,
Yeah. And then that ties into under the grid mod, and I just want to make sure these things are emphasized in our report to the council, so that at a simple level, we're understanding what are these big dials that are moving. And as we've had in prior discussions on the grid mod, and your note says it lowers systems outages. And that's been an important discussion. When we first talked about grid mod a few years ago, it was all about simply got to do it for capacity. And then we've come to understand, or the rest of us have come to understand, which you probably already did, is that it enables better reliability and resiliency, both because it's replacing old equipment and because it's better technology today. And we had talked about setting goals for our reliability. And so I wanted to ask, where do we stand on that? I think, yeah.
So we're correct. We're looking at grid modernization to not only increase capacity, prepare for electrification, but also look at our legacy systems to improve system reliability. And as we see these systems aging, we see increased levels of failure. So we're trying to cut that off, right, with replacements. And then as far as setting goals for reliability, staff's plan is to come back to the UAC in either August or September and talk about what those goals look like and find metrics that make sense for Palo Alto. I think it's still important to benchmark against other neighboring agencies, but again, the direction that I certainly heard from the council was that we need to look at what Palo Alto wants and what those goals want to be, and then also how to simplify that message for the community so they understand, in a very simple and direct way, what does reliability mean for them as far as like the system availability.
And just that theme is that if we're asking our community to electrify, then the historically very good reliability, which we had slipped from some and we've recovered for the most part, isn't good enough. It's basically needs to be the reliability of, if I no longer have gas, how reliable am I? Although we have to make sure everybody understands that most hot water heaters are electric ignition now, so they don't get their hot water necessarily if wait a minute, I had that wrong.
Space heating.
Yeah,
Space
sorry.
heating depends on electricity to push the hot air into your home.
Right. Already. Yes. That's what I meant to say. Thank you. Okay. And then one of the bullets says we're continuing to advocate for the Ames transmission source. I thought that had been settled. Is it not?
It's not built yet, so it's not settled. I guess that's my opinion on that. So we still need to closely monitor that and advocate and support PG&E as much as we can, PG&E staff, and to continuing to move that forward. Again, the timeline that appears to be out there is 2034. But again, I do think that that's something that we need to continue to help PG&E see as an important project and to manage their timeline on that.
Okay, so they've already made the commitment, but we want to keep the pressure on to make sure they live up to it, correct?
Well, I would rephrase that slightly and say that the CalISO has approved PG&E to build that starting in 2034 or after. And so that's where we want to provide that direction.
Lena, have a clarification? Operational.
Build an operational. I guess.
You'd have to start it well before then.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. And do we know when it's scheduled to begin construction? Okay.
But so the reality is that they need to start construction processes now, right? Because they need to look at the environmental, the permitting issues, and that's what we want to really kind of talk with them. As far as we understand internally, they've committed pre-construction dollars to it, which is a good point for PG&E. So now they have a project manager assigned, and they're starting to look at those permitting and environmental reviews that would allow them to construct it.
Good. So we're on that path because this has been a concern to the community for a long time. I encourage that the staff report and to the council and the community is to put a little more depth on where we are on that. We're past the point of where we were a few years ago of just trying to talk them into doing it. Now we've got to make sure that they stay on schedule. Okay. And then one of the other things we under the purpose of rate adjustments, it says adjust for changes in carbon-free energy costs. The first bullet is increase market resource adequacy requirements minus resource adequacy revenue. And I'm sure that nomenclature is really meaningful within your walls, but I don't think many other folks understand what that means. And so I don't know what would be the best way to describe it so that people will understand it, but I think we need to do that. And isn't it true, but that part of what that bullet, could you explain what that particular bullet means then? Revenue projected to decrease 4.4 million in FY 26-28 because of that ratio. change.
So if we want to go deeper into it, Lena is here to provide that. But yeah, Lena's your expert on this.
Yeah, that's due to regulatory changes in how our Western resource is planned to be treated in the expanded day ahead market, as well as increased requirements on resource adequacy, which is a reliability product in the California ISO and is a California specific product, and even people outside.
What do we mean by resource adequacy and yeah.
We normally have extra reliability product that we then sell.
Yep.
And with increasing requirements, we will have to use more of it to comply with the compliance requirements. And we are working with the California ISO and the CEC on both the requirements and how Western, the hydroelectric federal hydropower, can be an asset to the grid. But it is a new market that is actually rolling out May of this year. And so there's a little bit of hiccups with the federal folks working with the state folks.
So I want to take it up to much higher level. So we need to have enough capacity and reserves so that as a load serving entity, that we have projects that are available to make sure that if there's a differential there, that we have high reliability, right? So they call it resource adequacy. Dr. Perkins can go in all the detail associated with that, but I'd really just kind of try to keep that at that high level. Is we just got to make sure that we have capacity and reserves as part of the CAISO and greater grid in California.
Well, I'd encourage us going forward to both use the proper term and to use that kind of good description. And part of the bottom line, and I realize it's in flux somewhat here, is the degree to which we get additional revenue because of our green electricity. And it's important for our residents to know that when we went green early and at low cost, we're getting on top of that low cost, we're getting paid for it. And I don't think most people understand that. And I think it's a great story to make sure we get out there. Okay, let me see if I got anything else. Oh, under the skip that one. Just the 5-year trajectory. There was a note in the this is slide 15, that renewable energy targets are rising. So given that we're carbon neutral, how does that affect us that the targets are rising when we're already carbon neutral?
If I can go ahead and take that, that's just, we hit about a 60% RPS renewable percentage, 5 or so years ago. And then council approved us selling our extra renewable credits in order to lower costs so that we can help facilitate electrifying everything. But now, by 2030, the required percentage of renewables will be 60%. And so again, those surplus green attributes that are being monetized in lowering costs, there won't be that surplus on an average basis.
Targets are right. Oops. Targets are rising, and then that goes into it, something we can maybe have more discussion again, because we've talked about this each year, but what really will be the cost of those future renewable commodities versus our portfolio average of commodity. Okay. And then my very last thing on the hydro reserve, stabilization reserve, I'm sure it's in there, but I didn't catch it. So where are we on the reserve now, and why do we think we need to transfer it to replenish it by 6 million, right?
I didn't realize that was on. Yes, so currently the reserve is at about 18.7 million, I believe, is the current balance, and that is around the target level. However, we are looking at, potentially increasing that target level because of the changes in the hydro conditions in the future. And so within the guideline range, we would like to increase that amount by 6 million. It doesn't get it to the top of the range, but it increases it above that target level to mitigate those risks in the future of hydro.
But is that the long-term climactic changes that you're talking about as the change
It
risk?
could be for any drought, right? So we have a hydro stabilization adder that we could, a lever that could be pulled to make sure that during areas where we have droughts and we don't have as much hydro as, Palo Alto is really invested in getting power from the federal government in terms of WAPA power. It's very low cost, but it's also dependent on storage, right? So we are susceptible to that in terms of droughts. So we need to have a reserve there so that we do not have those price spikes going to our customers.
And is this 6 million additional to the reserve what we're planning on for just doing in a single year?
Yes, this would be in fiscal year 27 if the funds are available.
So given the discussion we had on the gas utility and how it really is looking at the package of cost increases to residents, this seems like something that we could spread more easily than some of the things we were talking about under the gas utility. And so I don't know whether the UAC had looked at that specifically, Bob.
We did not look at that specific.
Okay. Well, are we interested in having a little discussion on that and see if this is really one knob that we might be able to turn? So we're already at the median of our current reserve target. We want to increase it. Sounds good for the long term. I don't know why we have to do it in 1 year. And we're in a period of some steep utility rate increases. Why don't we spread that? Any feedback from staff on that?
I just want to reemphasize that when we had the previous drought, we did implement a hydro rate adjuster, and that was a significant impact to customer bills. And so I think from a staff perspective, we're just trying to make sure that we don't have price impacts to customers all at once.
And once again, I'm game with raising the reserve. It's just whether we do that full amount in a single year. And I'm trying to remember when we had to dip into that reserve, was that also coming out of COVID? I'm trying to remember which years. And did we have a double factor that we had basically frozen our rates and that compounded the issue? And I'm seeing Lena shake her head there. Yep. So it wasn't necessarily that our hydro reserve was so inadequate. It was that combined in a drought period with us artificially holding back on rate increases when costs went up.
So you're right. It was in 2023.
Yeah. So that further makes me feel comfortable with spreading this increase, which I support. But Alan?
Yeah, I just wanted to have the council kind of to bear in mind that it's really important for the electric utility to have reserves and cash on hand. As we go out to the markets, the financial stability of the electric utility is paramount. And knowing that we have stable that we are financially sound, we are willing to ensure that we have the financial stability really helps us when we go to the market in the future. So I just wanted to.
I'm good with that. And as I've said a couple of times, I'm good with increasing the reserve. The only question is, do we do that over 2 or 3 years versus over a single year? That's what I'm proposing or considering.
In your proposal is showing, relative to your point, that we are adding back reserves, that we're increasing and increasing. So I don't think that reserve and that amount would be negative in the bond.
And I think that is definitely a potential reasonable choice. I will just say that when this reserve was established 7 years ago, and the reserve magnitude has not been updated. And so, and we have some differences in dispatch for the hydro, and we have essentially increasing volatility within California between the hours of the day. And so we have over the long term probably increased exposure being with our current portfolio. So even if you were to spread it, it might have the impact of delaying a larger, increase later, just when those reserve guidelines are updated. But I think that yeah.
Okay. Mike?
At some point, we're going to be talking about all these reserves and the policy and, the min and the medium and the max and all that. So
But we've got it before us right now is a reserve change in a single year.
Yeah.
And I would advocate that we spread it over 2 or 3 years.
I'm totally on board with that. I was just notifying everybody that was listening that we do want to have a broader conversation on the reserve depths and, can we share between reserves and where can we and where can't we? Because that gives us some more tools to manage exactly the sort of mini crises that we're talking about right now. So yeah, I'd be totally up for that and to use it where we need to. So do we need to get down to the numbers part of that right now?
I mean, if ultimately the finance committee's recommendation is to not put a certain value in the reserves, then yes, we would want to know in concept. It doesn't need to be precise, but we need to understand the policy direction that the committee is wanting staff to take.
So should we look at that now or in the context of that other reserve discussion?
It depends on when you want it implemented. If you want it implemented in FY27 rates, now. If you are willing to, got it.
Okay.
One thing I will just note as a reminder, totally fair that we are making changes and where the changes are policy choices that the council and the committee obviously can make. And Director Lai and others can help me round this out to the extent. I just want the committee to understand that this is the one fund that we are going to be going out to the public or private financial markets in, frankly, the next 6 to 9 months. And the cash on hand, the reserve policies, and the risk, and even these discussions will influence the very first rating for this utility. We don't.
So this is for the grid mod, the bond that we're going to do.
Yes.
And how much we have in reserves will influence our rating.
Right.
Yes.
So maybe it makes sense for you to come back to us with what you think we could do in terms of taking that down a little bit without putting the rest of it at risk.
I mean, I'm not sure it's worth tinkering around the edges kind of thing.
So,
to be honest.
Yeah. So I think, just, we're doing a little huddle here in terms of to the extent that the money is available, that would bear the money would go to the hydro stabilization reserve. So it may not be available. This is a projection for this upcoming year. We are showing growth. So, when you look at the electric utility, the revenues are around, and correct me if I'm wrong, about $200 million a year in terms of that revenue. So there is some, changes that we could see. I think it's prudent for us right now to look at, trying to ensure that we are showing that positive revenue going back into reserves to show the market, that we are prepared and ready for the grid mod and also taking those necessary steps to make sure that we are financially sound.
Well, I think that argument has moved me toward thinking of it spreading over 2 years rather than 3. But also building that into that projection, if to the degree this particular reserve is really going to influence our credit rating for, I think that spreading it would not be significant. And as Lena pointed out earlier, when we were asking about our demand growth and how that might favorably impact the economics of the electric utility, we are deliberately being moderately conservative on that. And so it's like a lot of things that it's more likely that we'll have an upside than a downside in that area. And so I don't think we'd be overly optimistic to do this.
Well, you could add this to the staff motion and make it part of that. So if that'd be a good way to do it. Did you have anything else, George?
Just so I can understand the math, according to slide 5, our budget in 24-25 was 174 million. I know that's not exactly the same as the 26 number. But 3 over so if we were to contribute 3 million less this coming year, over 200 million or 174 million or so, that would be 1.5%. So we would so 3 million is 1.5% of the total budget. Does that mean we can basically move for a 4.5% rate increase instead of a 6% rate increase? Is that how the back of the envelope math works? And would that math work for a motion today?
Lena says sounds right. Okay. And I'm ready to make a motion whenever we're ready.
All right. Councilmember Burt.
Yeah, I would move the staff recommendations with the addition or one change that are increased to the hydro reserve. The 6 million increase be over a 2-year period with the corresponding adjustment in the reduction in the rate increase.
I'll second.
Nothing else to add.
Okay. Christine.
I'd like to pull it up just to make sure that I accurately captured it.
Great.
One moment, please.
So I believe the motion was $3 million over a 2-year period.
Yeah.
3 years each.
It's 6 million over a 2-year period, 3
Okay.
million per year.
And the corresponding rate increase.
Staff's okay.
We might want to say up to instead of at least 6 million.
Okay.
Okay. Let's go to a vote.
Councilmember Lowing,
Yes.
Councilmember Burt,
Yes.
Councilmember Liu.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you. Staff was well prepared. UAC did great work with his spokesperson here.
Later about why the operations was even almost 8.5 million less than that.
Yes.
I don't want to. But okay. Check. It's not.
Let's do a time check. We're doing airports now.
Correct. We have one more item, airport fees and charges.
Is that going to be like 30 minutes or?
I'm sorry. But yeah.
But you don't want to, Yeah. I was already supposed to be out of here. I was already supposed to be out of here. So, the third item on our agenda is the recommendation to City Council on fiscal year schedule of airport rates and charges. We have a comprehensive report in front of us, and we've all studied it. So let's get right to it.
Okay, well, good evening, Chair Lowing and Finance Committee, Brad Eggleston, Director of Public Works. With me are Airport Director Andy Swanson and Operations Manager Michael Lukens. Michael is prepared to give a presentation, and I've asked him to accelerate that and keep it brief.
Okay. Good evening, Chair and council members. As Brad said, I have Michael Lukens here to give this, as you mentioned, it's very in-depth study that was done looking at the rates and charges. We also have AGP Kurt Castagna and Ryan Lick. I'm not sure if Kurt's on, but I know Ryan is. If there's any technical questions that we can lean on them too. So I'll just roll it over to Michael to give the presentation.
All right. Good evening, Finance Committee. We're here to present the fee study. Staff recommends that the Finance Committee recommend to council that council adopt a resolution to adopt the fiscal year 27 schedule of airport rates and charges, accept the study that was done, authorizing an annual fee adjustment based on a new airport benchmark index effective July 1st. Okay, so the city entered into a contract with AGP, Ascension Group Partners, for a fee study with the goal to determine appropriate aeronautical fees to sufficiently cover the budgeted expenses at the airport for the Airport Enterprise Fund. AGP has an in-depth knowledge of aviation fees structures, and they provided recommendations to allow for a self-sustaining fund. Go faster.
Gotta go faster.
Okay, sorry. So there are multiple considerations that were taken into account. There was a methodology that we'll go over later. There's FAA grant compliances, 2 grant assurances that the airport needs to adhere to. There was significant financial planning that identified a funding gap. We'll go over that more. The airport was the fees were compared to comparable airports in California, with several of them in the Bay Area. There's mostly modified fees that are industry standards, along with a new fee that was proposed. And throughout the process, we kept airport users informed of the process and the findings. The fee study recommendations included an increase to the fuel flowage fee, increases to the monthly vehicle parking rate, as well as the mobile truck park operating permit. It establishes a commercial non-aeronautical permit fee for users of the airport, modifies the transient commercial fees for all transient airport users as well, and again modifies the annual increase with the ABI. So to get into a little bit more depth on those fees, the fuel flowage is recommended to be increased from 21 cents to 25 cents per gallon. That is one of the higher fees in the comparable airports, but it's not uncommon nationally. So it does seem to be a fair fee. The vehicle parking rate was increased to $100 a month, and then $20 per day is a 1/5 of the monthly rate, which is kind of an industry standard. The mobile truck operating permit was already set at $30 a day, so the monthly rate was set to 5 times of that to again be an industry standard. Currently, the 10% gross receipts fee is charged to rental car companies. AGP recommended that be applied to all commercial operators, non-aeronautical at the field. So that would include food trucks, ride shares such as Uber or Lyft operating at the airport. The transient fees is a little bit more complicated. So currently the airport doesn't charge any non-commercial transient landing fees. AGP recommended a $3 per 1,000 pounds of max takeoff weight to all non-commercial fees. The airport does charge commercial transient operators a landing fee that's based on 4 weight categories. And AGP recommended to change that to more of an industry standard of $9.50 per 1,000 pounds. And lastly, the transient tie-down parking rate was based on an hourly rate, and it was simplified to a daily rate, with the first 4 hours being paid by the landing fee. There was some concern with airport users for the new landing fee, mostly that they didn't want it. They didn't mind it being charged at Palo Alto, but they were concerned about it being adopted by other airports around the region. But it's important to note that there are other airports, not in our comparable group, but others in California that do charge this non-commercial transient landing fee. So we are not the first. Let's go. So the methodology that was used was a hybrid compensatory residual approach. The aeronautical leases, such as office tie-downs, hangars, were compared to market rates of other airports. Non-aeronautical land was based on fair market value in the local area. And then the landing fee structure was kind of the residual approach to balance the operating and capital costs and make sure that the airport enterprise fund remains self-sustaining. Additionally, there are 2 grant assurances, Grant Assurance 24, which says the airport should try to be as self-sustaining as possible, but our fees also have to be fair and reasonable and a transparent process for our determination. And the other Grant Assurance 25 just says that revenue generated on the airport needs to be used for airport uses. So the airport does have a fairly robust capital improvement plan that we have coming up in the next 5 years with $12.5 million in project costs. 1.4 of that would be the airport enterprise fund would need to cover. A lot of those projects are essential for the safety and operation of the field, including the runway, taxiway, electrical upgrades for lighting systems. Other projects would not be funded by the FAA and would need to be solely funded by the Airport Enterprise Fund, including solar vehicle charging. The long-range facilities and sustainability plan that the airport is working on will also likely identify additional projects that will add to that list. It's important to note that the airport is minimally staffed and there are significant maintenance of the current facilities. And the current budget, like I said, kind of reflects the essential operations only, and there's not much room for cost reductions. So that's why we have identified these fees to balance the budget. So again, the study had a list of 10 comparable airports. Many were in the Bay Area, such as Reed Hillview, San Carlos, Buchanan, Hayward. Palo Alto is, when compared, is at the higher range of those Bay Area GA airports, especially in tie downs and hangar rates. We have historically been on the higher end for those. That is why there's no major recommendation to increase those fees. We are instead increasing the transient fees to include a more fair and balanced approach. So transient operators account for 27% of the landed weight on the runway and 19% of all operations. Yet in the past, they've only paid less than 0.1% of the airport budget. With these fees, that'll increase to about 6%. So the AB Airport Benchmark Index would be the new fee. Currently, we raise fees annually based on the CPI of the San Francisco, Oakland Bay Area. It's recommended to use this new fee that would integrate the city's general rate increase by 2/3 and 1/3 of the CPI. The reasoning behind that was staff costs represent about 2/3 of airport expenses, and and materials and construction represent a third of airport expenses. So the GRI would cover the 2/3, CPI would cover 1/3. This hopefully would avoid high increases every 5 years that we could see. And the last side is again the staff recommendations, Finance Committee. So,
Is there any public comment?
Yes, we have one request to speak.
Do 3 minutes.
Our first speaker is Marie Jo F. Marie, you should now be able to unmute and provide comments.
Thank you. My name is Marie Jo Fremont, Palo Alto resident. Good evening, council members and Finance Committee. I'm glad that this fee analysis was done and that the city is concerned by the lack of profitability of PAO. The airport lost over $200,000 in fiscal 2025 and is projected to lose another $175,000 in fiscal 2026. Unfortunately, there is no published historical report on the airport's profitability since the city became the owner in 2014. Such data should be made public. It's quite likely that the airport lost money every single year over the last 10 years. This fee analysis reinforces the need for disclosing PAO-related financial information every year and since 2014. Some community members, including I, have requested that information in the past. We need transparency. Financial information disclosure is critical, given that the airport is engaged in long-range planning activities, and in particular, such disclosure must occur before council is asked to approve further capital investments at the airport. Thank you.
That concludes public comment on item 3.
Okay, great. Thank you. Yeah, let's go to our council comments. I just had one that I wanted to put on the table first. It's just interesting to me. How do you collect the fee from somebody who's landing and then taking off? Can you put up a special ticket booth for us out there?
So the airport entered into a contract just at the end of last fiscal year with Vector, actually with Altaport. They collect fees through flight tracker, ADSB, and that can record whenever the aircraft lands and takes off, and then they will automatically send a bill after that.
Good. I just found this staff report, the consultant report, quite good and quite organized. And I know you're kind of pushing the envelope to get a little bit more expensive relative to the other areas, but we are already. And I think you had the right tone there in terms of where you're going. I was kind of wondering at first couple of reads through this thing, why you're only raising the rates 2 cents on your on that first one from 21 to 25 cents a gallon, but now I get it. So I think it's really reasonable, and obviously we can take some questions, but I hope we're not going to sort of micromanage each one of these numbers. So others want to talk? Pat?
Sure. So thanks for the report. As we are looking at increasing, for instance, the hangar fees and the tie down fees, how does the demand versus our supply work? How are we? Are we in balance? Are we have greater demand than we have supply in those areas?
Yeah, we have a hangar waiting list, and last I looked, we have a couple of tie downs. Basically, it kind of fluctuates back and forth. So we're, I guess, probably right where we want to be.
And I remember that historically we had a shortage on hangars. How much of a wait list do we have? Because that implies demand exceeding supply.
It depends on which hangars, because we have different size hangars, so we have different demand.
But give me a feel.
On a general, Michael, do you recall
I don't know the exact number for each waiting list, but it's years long.
Years. So it's years and years. So movement in the hangars, I think that might be a better way. It's very slow. So you could wait for 5 years at least.
Tens of folks in the wait list combine, or
yes,
100 or somewhere upper tens,
30s, some
got it,
depending. Yeah, 40s.
And how many are occupying the hangars?
63.
We have 60 non-commercial hangars on the field. All are occupied. Some have multiple aircraft in them.
60 hangars.
60.
Yeah, I was wondering how many aircraft are in hangars versus how many are in the wait list. That's what I'm trying to, gives me a sense of that supply and demand. And it can be ballpark. I'm just trying to get.
I think so. There's three hangar wait lists. We've only got like 6 large T hangars. That wait list is very short, with maybe about 10, but we haven't had one turnover in years. Box hangars, we have 12 hangars, but that list is about 25 long. We have about 42 small T hangars, and that list is about 30, 30 individuals.
So doesn't it suggest that maybe it's the hangars that we ought to increase the price on more rather than the tie downs? That's where you got a big demand exceeding your supply.
So going back to Grant Assurance 24, we do have to make sure that our rates are reasonable and fair. So AGP looked at other airports and compared it, and with us being at the highest, they recommended to shift that balance to.
So even hangars, we can't charge according to demand. It's got to be that reasonable and fair.
Correct.
All right. Okay. And then with these increases, what's the P&L projection?
Just generally speaking, I think the last couple of years we've been operating at a loss of around 200,000 or slightly under that. And what are we estimating these to bring in? Around 200,000?
Around 210.
Okay. So that would take us close
So it
to
puts us
breakeven.
into a realm of a small profit where we can see how we're doing and how we can essentially.
Last question. I know we operate lean there, and yet we're on the higher end of the fees. Why are what are other airports operating at a loss, or is there some other explanation on why we've been operating at a loss, even though even before these we were fairly high on the fees?
I think part of that was the what we inherited when we took the airport back. So we have a loan to the general fund. So we had a lot of deferred maintenance. So we started out kind of.
So that would go into these forward projections if we're seeing those obligations go down, both deferred maintenance and our general fund loan. And is there some time we're going to see this? Is that going to be in more detail in the budget process? We'll see these projections?
It's in the budget, although we're not generally going into detail about that. Just big picture, I'll say the annual revenues for the airport are a little over 3.2 million. The general fund loan payback is 272,000 a year. So
that continues until when?
I believe it's a 12-year payback, which would take us to somewhere like 2032 or there.
Okay, and absent that, we wouldn't be in the red even.
That's correct. Absent that, we would be slightly in the black.
Got it. Thank you.
George?
Thank you. I really align myself with a few of the points that Councilmember Burt was putting down there. I know that the general big picture fees have to be reasonable and fair, but that doesn't. But are there any specific restrictions for why we can't increase the price of hangars?
It goes back to, as long as it's fair and consistent with the rates that are charged around the area or comparable airports. So that's what this study did, looked at that and said, okay, we're at the highest for our hangars.
Right.
And so
But
they're, so yeah, we use that methodology to come up with that and to make sure we followed the grant assurance.
if we say fair market value is a fair price, market value means that supply and demand clear and that there should be very little of a wait list. So it seems pretty easy to justify a higher hangar fee. And I think that's something I'd like to see certainly next time we come back. I think we are going from a few years seemingly of deficits to something that barely ekes us out into break even. I think small profit is not quite the right word. If it's like $10,000 surplus theoretically, to me that just means we're barely breaking even. So given that we do still need to make capital investments and other investments to the airport, I think this and we're coming out of years of deficits. I think like just barely breaking even is not quite enough. And I wish there were an option where we could check a box and be more aggressive on hangar fees, or even tweak these numbers a little bit. I'm not sure if there was. I mean, the consultant report is very long. I probably missed something, but like, I'm not sure if there are any options where we can still squeeze a little bit more and still be in that fair and reasonable bucket. But I wish we had those options, and I hope we can have those options next time.
And I think these are very old hangars too. So there's maintenance, we have downtime and repairs. So it's a challenge. It's kind of the quality of, the hangar that we're providing. So we can look at that and look into it. I'm not sure if Ryan's on, if he is. Okay, here's Ryan. Ryan, can you give us a little more insight on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So when it comes to rates and charges, like Andy and Michael had said, the FAA's guidance really is keeping the methodology fair, consistent, transparent. When it comes to aeronautical use, they don't prescribe a particular methodology. So what we do is we use this hybrid approach where we're looking at comparable values for aeronautical charges, and then we're balancing the budget based on landing fees. When it comes to non-aeronautical use, the FAA is very specific that it has to be fair market value. And they have a whole document that provides guidance on the appraisal method for determining fair market value. But essentially, the methodology for determining what the aeronautical rates and charges is going to be, they really leave it up to the airport sponsor, the city in this case, to determine how that should be. And so really that hybrid approach is the way that we've done that. Just to make sure that the aeronautical rates are competitive relative to other airports in the region. And then we use that landing fee, which is really, when you look at landing fee, that's about the only method that you can use to assess costs on transient operators. So historically, what happens is that the airport users, the base tenants, are the ones that tend to be paying primarily for the airport, even though you have transient aircraft that are coming from other airports and using the airport as well. Sometimes as much as half, if not more, of the use comes from users off airport. And so we like to use that landing fee as a way to kind of balance the budget and make sure that we're collecting use that's maybe not proportional, but at least relative to the use that's happening at the airport.
Yeah, I mean, I think if there are, the general spirit is I hope we can be more aggressive with fees. And if that transient fee is less regulated, it sounded like we're still proportionally undercharging for that fee, given that it was 27% of landed weight and less than 1% of operating revenues or something. So even if we increase the fee 3x, I'm going through my notes, we're still maybe undercharging. So I think unless there are any ready options from staff on ways that we can charge more that are not going to get us in trouble, I don't know what else we can do right now. But I think for next time, I would really emphasize the idea of getting into not just break even, but a just a little bit more than break even to the extent that the FAA allows, because we're still not in a great structural, I mean, I understand the loan is there, but we're still not in a really great structural financial position.
Yeah, and I would just add to, with a lot of the new fees that we proposed, it's very hard to forecast revenue because we don't have any current usage. And so this is a pretty substantial increase already, particularly adding new fees that aren't currently in the fee schedule. And coming back in a year or two after we have some data to be able to look and see what kind of revenue we're collecting from those will give us more insight into what we can charge and better, forecast the revenues going forward.
Can I add a little context along the lines of what Ryan was just saying? Is that traditionally the authorization we had from the city council upon the takeover of the airport was that these fees were set and we had authorization to increase them ourselves by CPI every year, which is what we've been doing since 2014. The recommendation we're bringing back to you now includes in the future after this year, including them in the municipal fee schedule. And that gives us a little more leverage and leeway to look at how this is working and make some more adjustments to tweak as we go, beyond just saying, well, we can only increase by CPI and, come back in 5 years after another rate study.
Okay. Any other questions?
I'll just follow up on that. I like the first the change in the methodology going forward, that going into the fee schedule, that we've now based it upon this study. And I concur with George that I think that the was it transient fees? Is it looking at increasing those going forward is something I'm very interested in. It hits another community benefit, which is that those planes are not our local resident users of the airport. And so they've been getting undercharged, but kind of having that additional impact on the community from overhead flights. Landings and takeoffs. And so charging more for that, I think, is both more fair, better for our budget, and better for the community.
Yeah, just conceptually, I was thinking about that when I was reading this report. The residents are going to be very happy that we're charging non-residents because they're paying for it right now, is their opinion. So I totally agree. Okay, can we have a motion? You want to move?
I move the staff recommendation.
Are you putting it up, Christine? Great. I'll second. Is that correct, Brad?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Let's call the roll.
Councilmember Burt,
Yes.
Councilmember Liu,
Yes.
Councilmember Lowing.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Great. Really glad that we're getting that thing done. Thank you. And this meeting is also done. We are adjourned.